Greeting, my name is Arlene Herson, and I'm glad that you can join me tonight because my guest is a man who lives the epitome of the American dream. A man who has made enough money to do anything he wants, go anywhere he wants to go, and when he goes in a style of spirit and adventure that is unequaled. His realities are most people's fantasies. Whether he is cruising the ocean on his magnificent yacht, jetting across the country on his private Boeing 727, riding one of his 75 motorcycles, or gently floating in his hot air balloon, or perhaps having a dinner party for 1,000, entertaining royalty, or dating Elizabeth Taylor. He does it with such joy that it's contagious. A man who has truly mastered the art of enjoying life. He is chairman of the board and editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. He is Malcolm Forbes, and we're going to get to know him right after these messages, so please stay right there. I'm Arlene Herson, and we're back with my guest, the incredible Malcolm Forbes, a man who really is incredible. Thank you for having us here in your office.
It's a pleasure. I feel like a movie star with all these, you and this crew here. It's started my morning off in very colorful fashion.
Well, a colorful man. You know, I use the word incredible, and I really mean it because you live an incredible life. I mentioned in the introduction all of the just some of the things that Malcolm Forbes has in his life. But you also have a castle in Tangiers, a chateau in Normandy, a house in London, a magnificent estate in New Jersey. Actually, you were born in New Jersey. That's where you were raised, and that's where this all started. Englewood, New Jersey, I believe.
New Jersey's home.
Okay. Now,
where I live and where all my children have grown up and where most of them live now is in Far Hills, and that's home. The other places that we have functions and play a part in our lives, but home is Far Hills.
Okay, now home has always been New Jersey. When you were, I mean, all of the incredible life you have now, when you were growing up in New Jersey, did you ever dream that Malcolm Forbes would be able to live the life that you're living now?
No, I didn't. I've lucked out in good fashion. None of these things, the dreams you have as a youngster, sometimes the realities intercede and sometimes they're exceeded. I've been lucky. Most of them weren't the things I'm into now I wouldn't have dreamt of as a youngster.
You know, very unusual because your dreams have exceeded, I mean, your realities have exceeded your dreams. I mean, we can't even dream of living the life that you live every day.
People say to you, well, what more could you want? And I said, well, I want to live longer because in the next round, I certainly won't have it as good as I've had it in this one.
You know, interesting, but it started really, I mean, because you're able to do what you do because of Forbes magazine, as we mentioned, a newspaper founded by your father. But you, even though you inherited Forbes magazine, you have made it so tremendously successful, much, much more successful than it was when you first took over.
Well, we've grown, but my father laid the foundations. He started it in 1917. He died in 1954. We've had a great deal of growth, but it's like building anything. Without a great foundation, you can't, and it's an enormous head start when your father has done the pioneering work.
Okay, true, but you did, you know, you were a pioneer in publishing. Well, pioneer may not be, but you started way before. Now, I hear that the first newspaper that you published was done on a mimeograph machine that you got for your 13th birthday. Was that the beginning of Malcolm Forbes, the publisher?
I guess. I've always been interested in publishing, in newspapers, in writing, and having opinions about everything, and so I did start in and did get a mimeograph for Christmas. In those days, there was no such thing as Xerox, and I first had a gelatin pad where you wrote with a purple ink that then you could put special paper on and pull off 6 or 8 copies, and I used to sell them around the neighborhood, and then in different classes in school and away at camp and in the Boy Scouts. It's just sort of been in my blood.
I can see an enterprising young man. I hear that your first typewriter was at 8 years old. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but
that's a fact, and my handwriting wasn't very legible then, and it's worse now because, but I'm one of the fastest hunt and peck typists around.
Well, I think anything Malcolm Forbes does, he does well, so that doesn't surprise me. You know, you can probably
hunt and peck faster
than...
really isn't the recommended way to use a typewriter.
No, but you do what you have to do when you have to do it. You know, if that's the only way you do it, then that's the way you do it.
Right.
You know, so that's part of it. And I would think, being so enterprising, you grew up, you had 5 brothers and a very successful father. Even though, you know, in Forbes magazine, even in those days, was certainly very, very successful. Was there a lot of competition?
In the family?
Yeah.
Well, there were 5 boys. I was in the middle, 2 younger, 2 older. There was competition, and some were more athletic than others, and some had sorted out their priorities. I remember we used to do battle with little toy soldiers. They were a favorite plaything, and we would do battle with each other, throwing marbles at the other guy's soldiers and so forth. Sure, there was competition because we were only about, my oldest 2 brothers and I were only about a year and a half apart. My youngest brother is 9 years younger, and the next one is 5 years younger. So there was a big enough gap that I could enjoy superiority. But at the bottom of the top 3 totem pole, it was tougher.
Well, but you're really a middle child, right? Smack in the middle of 5 children.
I've been in the middle
epitome
of a lot of things.
You know, they say middle children have to achieve more. I mean, I would say that that's certainly the epitome of the middle child. But was it tough? I mean, your father was so successful. You know, you talk about your inheritance. I think you're a self-made millionaire because, sure, you inherited a magazine, you know, sure, it was successful, but you made it so much more successful. You have made so many more millions. You're almost a billionaire. So I think you did it, you know, yourself, and you joke about this inheritance is what you got that enabled you to do what you have. But was it ever difficult being the son of growing up, you know, your father being such a visible name?
Well, it wasn't a difficulty. He had a widely syndicated newspaper column, and he was eminent. That's why the magazine started, his name, etc. It wasn't difficult. He was born in Scotland, and he was tough about earning an allowance, and in expecting us, he went over our report cards regularly. It was a fearful day, particularly if you had a couple of F's on the report card. And he expected behavior. I mean, when I read today, and we never had the problem with our kids, about kids paying no heed to their parents. God, if we'd tried paying no heed, we'd have been out in our ear. It worked out. I was fortunate.
Yes, fortunate. And he was a good influence, and you have 5 children. We're going to take a break, and then I'm curious as to their reaction to growing up with a father bigger than life, Malcolm Forbes. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. We're speaking with Malcolm Forbes right here in his office in New York City. I'm Arlene Herson, and we're back with Malcolm Forbes right here in his townhouse, in his office in New York City. One of the many places that Malcolm Forbes spends his time. But just before the break, actually, we were talking about you growing up with a successful father. Now, you have 5 children, and 4 of your sons are in the business. If you had to give them advice on growing up and working with a successful father, what would it be?
Well, I did.
Right.
I mean, the advice, and what my wife and I had always agreed on, that the kids, as they grew up, had to be what they wanted to be, to do what they wanted to do. We were I never grew up expecting, demanding, or trying to aim them to be part of the business. As I did with my father, kind of when you're exposed, it takes with some. And my oldest son is a first-rate writer. He's a very good businessman. My second oldest son had no interest in the business initially when he got out of college, and my third oldest son is associate publisher. He's our leading expert on the art we collect, and he's, as he says, he's in the selling end of the business, in the advertising end. My fourth son didn't come into the business until we negotiated to acquire American Heritage magazine, and he's really knowledgeable about history, loved the subject, handled the negotiations, and now runs American Heritage. It's a totally separate part of the business. Each one's in a separate part of the business, and they only came in, and they're doing what turns them on. And I would say to anybody, young or for that matter, who is old but not dead, it's an awful waste of time if you can avoid doing something you don't like to do. You should do what turns you on, because to work 5 days a week at something that turns you off, so you have the money to do what you want for 2 days a week, you've got very little % of your life to have any sense of fulfillment. So with our own children, we did preach, do, if you can, what it is you want to do.
I agree with that 100%. Unfortunately, so many people don't do that, but absolutely, I agree. Why earn all the money if you don't enjoy it
and the odds are you won't earn much money
Yeah,
if you're not happy at what you're doing. You're not going to do it
Absolutely.
well enough to earn much money. And remember, money, the idea of the money is so you can do things you want to do. And if you can be doing a job that you like, that's what you do if you had the money. So it all goes together. It fits. And for a lot of people, it's simply they haven't made up their mind what turns them on, what they want to do. So it isn't that they drift. Early on, you should roll around till you find something you're happier with. Nothing is ever the millennium.
I agree. Okay, speaking about actually, you mentioned, we talked about your 4 sons being in the business, but you have a daughter. One girl finally in the family after 5 boys.
After 4 boys, we had a daughter, and that was it. She's now married to a Philadelphia lawyer, and she's very active in a number of causes. She's been active in weekly newspapers, but she's very active with disabled young people.
Well, she's married to a paraplegic, which
Right.
is very interesting, because also he didn't become a paraplegic after they were married. He was a paraplegic before they were married.
Yep.
Now that, kind of...
And he has such a wholesome attitude. I mean, you'd never know it. He was a sports buff. He was in an automobile accident when he was in high school. And he is a very handsome fellow. He had good marks. He was one of those golden kids in high school, an automobile accident. He's been paralyzed from the waist down. He went to law school. My wife met him. My daughter met him when he was in his wheelchair, and they are blissfully happy. Yeah. And he's, as I say, now practicing law with his own business and a couple of partners. It's turned out wonderfully. Some people cope with the bad breaks, and he's a great example.
Sounds like a good person to be a member of the Forbes family. You have referred several times to your wife. Now, you are now, Malcolm Forbes, a bachelor. You're a single man. I can't tell you, by the way, I do want to tell you how many women tried to bribe me to come here today to meet you. How many single women
why
said,
didn't you accept?
Well, because they feel that you're taken with none other than, you know what I'm going to say, Elizabeth Taylor.
Well, I think everybody's taken with Elizabeth Taylor, right? I think she's enormously attractive, great fun, and but I think I have enough sense not to try to stake her out as private property.
Or she you. I kind of wonder how, after being married, you were married.
39 years.
Yeah, 39 years. To a woman, by the way, I mean, who hated public life. You loved public life. How did you deal with that?
Well, I just dealt with it by doing what I wanted to do. I had great political ambitions when I was younger, and well, it just helps when two people are in love. They do things that they might not have done otherwise. So my wife put up with it, but then after 39 years, I would say, well, honey, you've got to get back from the ranch now early in September, because we must do this and we must do that and so forth. And she finally said to me one summer when I was out there 3 years ago, she said, I really don't got to do all these things anymore. You spent your life doing pretty much what you want to do. And she said, I think I'm at the point now where I just don't want to do a lot of the things that we have to do. And, you can't be entertaining Mr. and Mrs. and not have your Mrs. And so forth. So anyway, she now lives 2 miles down the road, where we see not as much of each other as when we married, but we are very close and good friends. It's very amicable, but I can tell you, it took a great deal to adjust after 39 years of married life to going home, and there ain't no wife.
That's interesting. How do you like being single? I mean, how are you adjusting to single life?
Well, I've adjusted, and I do find that I go out a lot more and do more different things than I would have done and did do while we were married. Everybody adjusts to whatever circumstances require.
Well, I must say, you're certainly adjusting very well. We see you up in a balloon. We see you on your motorcycles. You do so much. You are really bigger than life. We're going to take a break and talk some more about Malcolm Forbes. We'll be right back after these messages, so please. Arlene Herson, and we're back with my very special guest, Malcolm Forbes, right here in his office in New York City. Having you sit still here on the ground for a little while, and the time is going so fast because there's so much that you've done and so much that you're doing and so much that you're going to do. But one of the things we just touched upon it very briefly, you mentioned your political life. You had political aspirations at one time. You ran for governor of New Jersey. Lost. You were a state senator for many years, and then lost for the governorship. Then you didn't try again. Why did you decide then to go in another direction?
I didn't feel any draft. Nobody was calling me back. As a matter of fact, my father died, and it was necessary to pay more attention to business, and I discovered in business and running Forbes magazine that it's more fun to be consulted and in demand than to be the one asking everybody all the time in public life. Public life is a tough life. I had a burning ambition, but now I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Okay. Well, you weren't a tenant in the White House, but you've been a guest in the White House a lot of times. And in Forbes magazine, you have your fact and comment column, which, by the way, I have to tell you, some people say it's the best in the magazine. They pick it up sometimes just to hear what you have to say.
You're very kind.
No, it's true. I'm just repeating what I heard. Yeah. But, however, have you been called upon to give advice to presidents?
Oh, even when not called upon, I can't refrain from doing it. So I've done it to many and been heeded by few.
Okay, well, you are so successful, and we talk about, all of the wonderful things that have happened to you, but you were also very generous. You're not very public sometimes about all of the generous things that you do, except perhaps that $1 million that you gave to Elizabeth Taylor. That was very, very public. But behind me are colors from, I don't know how many honorary degrees that you have from various different colleges. If I mentioned all of the honors that you've gotten, awards, I would need a whole show just to mention that.
Some of them I didn't even have to pay for.
Yeah, but you have. You've been very generous.
Well, about honors, my father used to say, honors are not without price, son. And when somebody, the first time it happened, I was highly flattered when somebody called and asked if I'd be the guest of honor at some worthy charitable affair. I thought, gee, of course, I was thrilled, and I wondered why they were trepidatious about asking. Well, I quickly learned that if you accept to be guest of honor and win some trophy, you are expected to pack the house, to buy the tables at multiple thousands of dollars. You're supposed to not bilk, but get all your friends to give to the cause. So what it really is bait, but for worthy causes. So these honors that I have received, the honorary degrees, not always the case. I haven't had to provide a stadium for every college that has given me a degree, but you carry with it a certain obligation, and having worked so hard to get a Bachelor of Art degree, when I'm offered an honorary doctorate, I accept with alacrity.
Wow. Okay, well, you accept it, but I have to say also that there have been, we think of you as tremendously successful, there have been some failures. There was a time that Forbes magazine was not doing so great during the Depression, and you had to, you were working in the mail earning $15 a week or whatever, but you had to work. You lost for governor. You wrote a book, which is one of the things called The Sayings of Chairman Malcolm, and you talk about, if you've never failed, you won't succeed. Victory is sweetest when you've known defeat, and failure is success. We learned from it. Is that how you feel about failure?
Oh, absolutely. There's no such thing as anybody going through life without failure. There's no insulation from the ups and downs. And anyway, how would you know what happy was if you hadn't been sad? I mean, how would you know what a joy is if you hadn't been had sorrow? I mean, everything has to be relative, and nobody has a total smooth flight ever upward. Life isn't that way, and I think failure is very important, particularly early on, so that you get a sense of proportion. The golden boys in high school very often they never have it again so good, and they wonder why the world doesn't continue that way. I think kids that don't have it right off the bat aren't popular right away and so forth. When they have to struggle, they learn their lessons early enough to use them in their life. It's when people have an early glide and then hit the bumps, they sometimes can't cope with them.
That's interesting. So the bumps are good then, along the way,
listen,
and it's kind of a...
As long as they don't bump you off mentally.
Okay, well, I have to say, you know, we're almost being bumped off here because of the fact there's so much with Malcolm Forbes. You know, I mentioned that you're an author, and I have to say, in one of the quotes that have almost become, you know, as famous as the man who wrote them, you are famous for the quote of saying, the difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. And you have a lot of toys. You have done so much. Will you come back next week so we can do a second part to this interview, so we can talk not just about the business, but of the fun that Malcolm Forbes has?
Sure, be fun to do.
We'll be right back after these messages. I'm Arlene Herson, and it has been incredible being here with Malcolm Forbes. We've been talking about some of the things he's done, his generosity. By the way, we had mentioned the $1 million he gave Elizabeth Taylor. It wasn't just Elizabeth Taylor. He gave that to the AIDS Foundation. He gives so much. He gives so much to so many people. He's given a lot to us, I will tell you, in letting us spend this time with him. And we are going to speak with him again next week. So please, don't forget to be back same time, same place next week when we get to talk more with Malcolm Forbes. Hope to see you then. Good night. I'm Arlene Herson, and I'm glad you can join me tonight because my guest is a man who has an incredible outlook on life. Live life to the fullest. Share what you have with your friends. Be generous to those who need it. Soar through the sky and race through the land. Fulfill your fantasies. Make your dreams come true. But always, always remember that life is to be enjoyed. Does this sound like Peter Pan? Not quite, but close. We're talking about philanthropist, balloonist, motorcyclist, art collector, millionaire businessman, author, and ultimate host. The chairman of the board and editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, Malcolm Forbes, and we're going to meet him right after these messages, so please stay right there. I'm Arlene Herson, and we're back with my very special guest, Malcolm Forbes. We're here in his townhouse in New York City, which also happens to be his office. Thank you for having us here again. We were here
Fun to have you back.
But, you know, we talked last week a little bit. There's so much with Malcolm Forbes that there's no way that we could do this in one show. So here we are again, and I thank you for all your time. But, you know, you've made a tremendous success of your life, which we talked a little bit about in the first show. But you have homes all over the world. You have terrific kids. You have motorcycles, balloons, you know, wonderful way of enjoying your life. But you really are able to enjoy it. Now, people that work for you have described you as one of the most dynamic individuals in the world, one of the most generous people in the world, a man who really knows how to enjoy himself. I mean, I could go on and on. Does it embarrass you when people say all of those things about you when you describe that way?
Well, I tell you, I enjoy the exaggeration because it's probably much kinder than the truth. But it's nice to know that a couple of them have been kind enough to speak well of me behind my back.
Okay, you know, interesting, they have, and th've said, but don't tell them we said it. So therefore, you know,
well, I appreciate that you
okay.
told me. Because, you know, part of being a boss is that you are supposed to hear, and you do hear, the complaints, the shortcomings, the problems, and that's what your function is. So it's nice once in a while to have somebody give me secondhand such a nice report card.
Okay, and what I hear and what I get from all these people is the fun, that you work hard. I mean, there's no question that you work hard, because you couldn't have made the money if you didn't work hard. But was there a time that you said, hey, wait a minute, I worked hard, this is for me, I'm going to have some fun? Was it conscious?
No, I tell you, because the most fun of my life, literally, is what you would describe as work. I'm at my desk somewhere between 7 and 7:30, and I'm usually there till 6 in the evening. I love what I'm doing. I would tell you, I would not enjoy, whether it's the boats, the planes, or the motorcycles, or the balloons, or the ranch, I wouldn't enjoy those things half as much if I wasn't engaged most of my time in working, because for me, the work I do, writing, running a business, having ideas, being able to implement them, all of that is really a ball.
Okay, you know, but it did start with work. And interesting enough, because you have even, I mean, you have such fun, even in your means of transportation. Now, I don't know whether to start with you, because I want to start about all the fun you have. I don't know whether to start in the air, on the land, or in the sea. Because, I mean, when Malcolm Forbes travels, he travels, you know, in so many unusual ways. But I'm going to start in the sea, only because that's where it started, okay, with the first Highlander, which you really, when you came over and you took over Forbes after your father had died, and you were the publisher or editor-in-chief, or now you bought the first Highlander. Now I hear that some people here at Forbes thought you were being extravagant. They really didn't think it was such a great idea. You bought it, you know, you went ahead. Obviously you proved them wrong, but what did you have in mind then?
Well, I've always loved the sea. I've always loved boats. We have a big toy boat collection, which sprang from nostalgia about playing with boats, and with your mind and your imagination, you can put the tin lid of a can on a lake or a pond and imagine it's a great ocean liner. So I've always been moved by the sea, and when the opportunity came, moved on the sea. The first two boats I had were smaller and personal. The first official Highlander was a converted Canadian Corvette, and this goes back, I guess, 40 plus years. No, not quite 40 years, and it could have been, it was a 76-footer, and we did a little modest entertaining, taking friends up the river to West Point home games and so forth, and we discovered that with the boat, a boat, people are much more inclined to say yes to an invitation because there's an appeal at being at sea or on the water. So that's how they emerged.
Well, you know, interesting that they've gotten bigger and bigger, and we have some pictures.
That's what happens with boats. They always get a little bigger. I think we're at max now.
Well, this current Highlander, we have some pictures, and we're going to show some of the pictures while we're speaking, because the staterooms, the rooms on this Highlander are absolutely incredible. But I heard that it's really all business, that at one point that you wanted to take this as a tax deduction.
No,
but you couldn't take it as a tax.
It used to be permitted, and our boat literally is 95% of its life is entertaining people that are important to us as news sources or in business. It's right now in the Pacific Basin, and we'll be entertaining both heads of states and chiefs of corporations, etc. It functions, it's fun, it's different, it's a great success, and it's not a tax deduction.
It's going to Singapore next week, but we'll talk about that when we come back, because there's so much here, and there are so many other ways that you travel, but we're going to take a break right now. We're speaking with Malcolm Forbes. We'll be right back after these messages. Please don't go away. We're back with Malcolm Forbes here in his townhouse, in his office in New York City, where you don't get to spend a lot of time because you're always traveling. You just came back from the Fiji Islands, I believe a week or so ago, and we mentioned that you're going to Singapore on Monday with, among other people, Elizabeth Taylor will be on board as well. But that's just part of the way you travel. You're going in your very private Boeing 727, where you will meet your yacht in Singapore. Now, also, I do want to talk about your friendship tours, because I don't know whether motorcycles are coming on this trip, but motorcycling, I mean, you have done more for motorcycling than anybody in the world. What is it about motorcycling that appeals to you so much?
I think I was 48 before I had a ride in one. I had the same feeling that most people have, that motorcycles are dangerous and that sort of kind of a flaky occupation to be into. But when you try something, it's like almost everything in life. If you try something you're not familiar with, you can discover there's a good reason those who love it, love it. And I had the motorcycle ride. I discovered it awakens all the senses you don't use in a car. In a car, you don't have to care about the weather. You crank up the window, you change the air conditioning. When you're going to get in your bike, you have to be concerned. Is it going to be cold later? Is it hot now? You have to watch the road. You see more because you have to anticipate what people are going to do. All your senses are alert, and it's an extraordinarily delightful experience. We have two of them, incidentally, on the Highlander, and we sling them ashore from time to time. We were in Tahiti on this trip. We slung the two Harleys ashore, and lo and behold, in an hour we had all the bikers in Tahiti in tow on a tour. But you mentioned the time I spend traveling. I do want to add that probably 75% of my time is right here. I got to pay for all these toys.
Well, you know, this isn't such a bad place to be.
No, I love it. I love
you know,
it. I agree.
This is a nice place, good area on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. But with your motorcycle, it's not, and when you are home, I understand it's not that unusual to see Malcolm Forbes and his motorcycle gang, if I can call it that, in various places in New Jersey. But what is unusual is to see you motorcycling across Russia, China. I hear you were the first Westerner ever to cross the USSR on a motorcycle.
Yeah, we were the first group they allowed in and the last to date. And it's the same in China. I don't know if it's, we behaved ourselves, I thought, and we did have wonderful friendship tours. And we're having another this August, end of July. We will be doing a friendship tour through Turkey with 8 Harley-Davidsons and a balloon about 8 stories high in the form of Suleiman the Magnificent. As a matter of fact, you have a rendering of it there. Yes. I think it's going to be quite a spectacular balloon, and he was the greatest sultan they had in the time of their, when Turkey really ruled 2/3 of the world.
I have got to show this. I mean, this is a balloon.
And
now,
the interesting thing at the bottom, that little dot at the bottom, that's the basket that we'll be in with the propane. So it gives you a sense of the height and proportion of this balloon. It's going to be a dazzler.
How tall is this balloon?
It'll be about 8 stories high. It'll be, I don't really know, 80 to 90 feet high. It's going to be a big one.
Now, this is incredible. Now, you mentioned a friendship tour. Now, you are going to Turkey with this incredible balloon that you have commissioned just especially for that trip. You are going with your motorcycles. You're going with a group of people. What's the purpose of these friendship tours?
Each one has been timely. The president of Turkey, I do know, he's been aboard the Highlander here. We've been together on some occasions. I did know his predecessor, who ended up in jail for a while. But Turkey's important to the United States. It's on the frontier with Russia. They've been extraordinary allies in our difficulties in Korea and so forth. They're important, but their friendship has been strained over their historical difference with Greece. And now that we are, some of our bases are being rolled up in Europe, and by a lack of support in some of the countries, it's very important what we do and the support we have in Turkey. So it seemed to us it was timely. My sons will be with me to make a gesture of friendship that's got nothing to do with military aid. We're not asking for something. We're just there to express the significant goodwill that Americans feel toward an ally who has been absolutely very stand-up and consequential in some of our more difficult periods.
You know, interesting, because it is a wonderful way of going to another country with Americans, being able to get your point across and being able for them to feel positive to you. You have done this many times, your friendship tours where you go with your balloons. You have commissioned other balloons, if I might. We have here a balloon that you commissioned, an elephant commissioned.
That was
tell
for
us about
Thailand,
that.
where the elephant's a sacred beast, and Thailand again has been a frontline country and is now under fire, literally on its borders from Vietnam and their occupation, Burma and so forth. They're an important friend and an important part of the world to us, and so these trips just bring an expression. They're not asking for anything, but the elephant's expressive, and we flew it all over Thailand and actually in Malaysia and Singapore, and it just generates a good feeling.
It sure does. I mean, here is a giant Sphinx. I mean, obviously made for Egypt. We can't.
That was fun. And, we flew it over the Sinai Desert and so forth. And since the Sphinx there, the original, doesn't move much, we thought it would be good fun to bring the Sphinx to the rest of the people in Egypt.
You know, I have two more that I'm just going to show quickly because I know that you do the balloons, and I don't have all of them for many of your friendship shows, but that gives us an example. But here is a balloon of the chateau that you own in Normandy. I mean, this is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that is it. It looks like what it is. It's not the thing to look up and see on New Year's morning. The first time we flew it here, it was about 8 a.m. New Year's Day, and some people called up and said, gee, you know, they didn't know what they drank the night before, but officer, there's a house over my house. It's very impactful.
Well, actually, I wonder what people will feel when they see a motorcycle over. I mean, here is your giant motorcycle, also in balloon form.
That's 200 feet long, and I tell you, it's very popular anytime motorcyclists gather.
Well, and you're popular. I mean, every place you go, all the goodwill on these friendship tours and all the things you do. We're going to talk some more when we come back after this break. We're speaking with Malcolm Forbes. We'll be right back after these messages. Please stay right there. We're back with my special guest, Malcolm Forbes, here in his office in New York City with all these incredible balloons. I mean, when you're interested in motorcycles, I mean, I understand you have 75 or 80 motorcycles right now in your garage.
Scattered around.
Okay, including the purple one you gave to Elizabeth Taylor.
Right.
But the ballooning is incredible. I mean, everything you do, you seem to just, I mean, you just don't do a little bit, you do a lot. But you were the first person to fly across America, the United States, in a hot air balloon. But you ended in the Chesapeake Bay.
Well,
Did you know?
we were, as luck would have it, on the last day of this cross-country flight, we were headed right down the Chesapeake Bay, and between that bay and the ocean, there's only a narrow bridge, and rather than try to land in the rigging of the bridge, and if you miss that, you're in the Atlantic Ocean. We figured we'll come down in the bay, and again, we lucked out.
You lucked out because you're here and because
Right.
you're alive. You were with your son, Robert.
Yes, Bob. If it hadn't have been, if where we touched down hadn't have been shallow water, I wouldn't be here today. I might be a faint and fading memory, but I'm very glad the water was shallow at the moment of our touchdown.
You know, as a matter of fact, in reading one of the books that you have written is Around the World on Hot Air and Two Wheels, I think
Right.
it's called, and in it you describe what happened and when you were in the Chesapeake Bay and when you were trying furiously to hold on to the
balloon, and
you
it
know.
pulled away with the weight of us out of it. So it was a scary experience.
But your son Robert was suddenly walking on water. I mean, I think
he
that's
had a long beard at that time and long hair, and I looked up and I thought, my God, there's Jesus, you know, I made it. And he said, Pop, you can stand up, you know. At that point, I was about ready to let go and give up.
Did you ever, I mean, motorcycling is dangerous. You have broken ribs, you've been in accidents. Balloons, you know, are fun, but there's danger. Have you ever really felt, hey, this is it? Have you ever been worried about the danger?
Yes, the only time I've had many close escapes, once with the King of Morocco when they attempted to assassinate him and killed one out of the 5 guests, but recently, maybe 3 years ago, in the Sphinx balloon, the first time we flew it here, I went too high too fast, and the balloon blew its top, which means it lets out all its hot air. And I thought, well, that's it in a balloon. You come down like a rock. And there were about 2 minutes of descent, and I thought, you know, my life didn't float in front of me. but I thought, you know, why now? I would almost say, on the verge of saying, damn it, and I thought that'd probably be inappropriate to expire on an oath. But we hit the ground, and what turned out was that the forepaws and the tail of the Sphinx had cold air in it, and they had folded up over the essence of the hot air balloon, the center, and had slowed our descent enough so while we came down faster than you would with a parachute, we didn't splatter when we hit.
Oh my God.
But on the way down, I thought this was it.
Well, I've been told that Malcolm Forbes, you know, a cat may have 9 lives, but I've been told that Malcolm Forbes has at least 15 and is still
Well,
going.
I'm on my back 9.
Yeah. You know, when you mentioned the king of
Morocco.
of Morocco, it's a whole other story, but that was a party you were invited to.
His birthday.
Yeah.
He hasn't celebrated them in the same fashion since.
But there was a revolution, and many people were killed, and
Well,
you were lucky
it was a plot. It was a plot for somebody to take over. It didn't work, and it's fortunate for the world and certainly the United States because the King of Morocco, King Hassan, has been quite a bridge between the West and the Muslim world, and a very staunch ally of the United States historically and currently. So we were lucky that this coup didn't result in his death, but it did result in the death of a lot of his guests.
Wow, incredible. You go to a party, you don't expect that to happen, but, you know, you
It's
are
overdoing
such a...
the
Okay,
fireworks.
that's for sure. Well, you had fireworks. You know, you had the 70th birthday party for Forbes, which was the most spectacular party probably ever given. I don't know how you can ever top that. But that's when you first went public with the fact that you were dating Elizabeth Taylor. Now, everybody's...
It was a little hard to keep her a secret.
Well, but that was a very public way of kind of introducing the fact that you two were going out together. How do you feel about this interest in your public life, in your private life? I mean, people really care what you're doing now.
Well, I think it's understandable if your date's Elizabeth Taylor that people are interested. You know, it's... I don't know. Sometimes you think it's a pain in the neck. On the other hand, the visibility hasn't hurt the awareness of Forbes magazine around the world. And so it happens that the things I do, like the motorcycles and the balloons, they're visible. So you do hit the print once in a while.
Once in a while. You do it a lot. And as we say, it all benefits Forbes magazine. So behind it all is business that you're thinking of, aside from having fun. And you have more fun than most people I know. But in your book, The Saying of Chairman Malcolm, one of the things you say is, when what we are is what we want to be, that's happiness. Now, are you what you want to be?
I'm more than I ever thought I would be. And I'm as happy as any mortal has a right to be, and certainly more than I could reasonably have expected to be.
Oh, wow. And, you know, you give so much, and you give so much to so many people. I have to say, you know, the parties and the success and
But
the money.
You know, basically, I think most people, if they had the opportunity and the means that I have, they would do, if not literally the same thing, they would act the same and share the same, because things are twice as much fun when you share it with somebody. So I don't think I'm any different than people would be if they had the unique combination of both money and time and where you're the boss and everything fits. I don't think I'm unique. I'm just unique in the opportunity to do it all.
Well, I think you're unique, and I have been told before I came here that you enrich the lives of all those you touch, and I have to say you have enriched mine a great deal, and I thank you very much for spending this time with us.
Well, that's a terrific farewell. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Please stay right there. We'll be right back after these messages. I'm Arlene Herson, and I hope that you have enjoyed this time that we spent here with Malcolm Forbes in his office in New York City. He is absolutely an astounding man. I have heard that he is one of the few people that really knows how to enjoy life. I think perhaps you got a little bit of an idea of how much he enjoys life just seeing him on the show. But this is, believe me, just the tip of the iceberg. He not only enjoys his life, he shares it with all those around him. I hope that you got some feeling about what it's like to be with Malcolm Forbes. I know that I did, and I hope that you will join us again next week. Meantime, hope to see you then. Good night.